My boss accidentally sent the email to everyone. I've worked at my company for about 6 years now. It's a mid-sized corporate office. Not huge, but big enough that people mostly keep to their own teams. The usual office staff meetings that should be emails. Performance reviews that feel like guessing games. And the constant rumor that layoffs are coming soon. Nothing unusual. Until the email. It was a Tuesday morning around 9:15 a.m. I had just sat down with my coffee when Outlook pinged with a new message. The sender was my boss. Subject line: Ray. Performance review planning. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Reviews were coming up soon, so HR had been going back and forth with managers about raises and promotions. But when I opened the email, something immediately looked strange. The recipient list, instead of being sent to HR, or maybe a couple of senior managers, it had been sent to the entire department mailing list. Over 120 employees. Everyone from junior staff to senior analysts. I figured maybe it was some announcement. So I started reading, and within about 3 seconds, my stomach dropped. Because it wasn't an announcement. It was my boss replying to HR about which employees he thought were worth keeping. And he wasn't holding back. The email started like this: honestly, if we're being realistic, half this team is replaceable. Right there, I already knew this was bad. But it got worse. He had written a full breakdown of several employees by name. Not just performance notes either. Personal opinions. Real, brutally honest opinions. Opinions that those same employees were now reading. One part said, James constantly misses deadlines but somehow still thinks he's leadership material. I'm not sure where he gets the confidence. Another one. Sarah produces decent work, but she's extremely emotional. Not someone I'd trust in high-pressure situations. People started replying in Slack almost immediately. Wait, did everyone get this? Is this real? Please tell me this wasn't meant for us. Someone wrote, my name is literally in this email. Then I kept scrolling, and there it was. My name. My boss had written, Kevin is technically competent but lacks the backbone to push back on clients. Probably fine staying where he is, but I wouldn't promote him. I just stared at the screen. 6 years at this company, and that's what he thought of me. Meanwhile, Slack was absolutely melting down. People were screenshotting sections and posting them in private channels. Some people were angry. Some people were embarrassed. Some people were just laughing in disbelief. One coworker wrote, wow, didn't realize we were doing public executions today. But the worst part wasn't even the insults. It was what came later in the email. Near the bottom, my boss had written, if layoffs happen next quarter, I'd start with the people listed above. He had literally marked people for potential layoffs by name and accidentally sent it to those same people. The office atmosphere shifted instantly. Meetings started getting cancelled. People stopped chatting. You could see little Slack dots popping on and off as managers clearly panicked. Then about 20 minutes later, another email came in from my boss. Subject line: please disregard previous email. The entire message was one sentence. Apologies for the confusion. That message was sent in error. That was it. No explanation. No apology for what he actually wrote. No attempt to clarify anything. Just please disregard. Like we hadn't just read his real opinions about half the department. The rest of the day was chaos. People were whispering in hallways. Co-workers were asking each other, what did he say about you? One woman in our team went to the bathroom and cried. Another guy spent the entire afternoon updating his LinkedIn. James, the guy he called out for missing deadlines, just sat at his desk silently staring at his screen. Around 3 p.m., he packed his bag and left early. Didn't say a word. Over the next week, things got even worse. HR scheduled check-in meetings. Managers suddenly became overly nice. People were clearly interviewing elsewhere. The trust in leadership was basically gone overnight. Then 2 weeks later, HR announced a restructuring initiative. 3 employees were let go, including James. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone remembered the email, and everyone knew exactly why he was on that list. The weirdest part, my boss still works here. No demotion, no apology meeting, nothing. But the office is different now. People don't talk freely around him anymore. Conversations stop when he walks by. Because once you see what someone really thinks about you, you can't pretend you didn't read it.
My coworker stole my idea. Then the CEO asked one question. I've been working at this company for about 3 years. It's a marketing firm, the kind where everyone pretends to be collaborative, but secretly treats every meeting like a competition. Ideas are currency, and everyone's trying to look like the smartest person in the room. About 2 months ago, our team was assigned a big project. a new campaign for one of the company's biggest clients. Landing this account meant bonuses, promotions, the whole thing. My manager asked us to brainstorm concepts for the pitch. I spent an entire weekend working on mine. I researched the client's audience, mapped out a strategy, even mocked up a sample campaign rollout. By Monday morning, I felt pretty confident about it. Before the big meeting, I mentioned the idea to one coworker. Let's call him Dylan. Dylan and I had started around the same time. We weren't close friends, but we got along well enough. I thought it would be helpful to bounce ideas off someone. I explained the whole concept to him. The audience targeting, the campaign slogan, even the engagement strategy I'd built around it. He nodded and said it sounded solid. Then the meeting started. Our team gathered in the conference room with our manager and 2 senior directors. One by one, people started pitching ideas. Then Dylan spoke up, and my stomach dropped, because he started describing my idea. Not something similar. The exact idea. Same audience strategy. Same messaging. Even the same tagline I had come up with. For a moment I just sat there frozen, trying to process what was happening. He didn't look at me once. Just confidently explained the concept like it was his own. The room loved it. One of the directors said, "That's exactly the kind of direction we need." My manager nodded. "Great thinking, Dylan." I kept waiting for him to acknowledge where the idea came from. He didn't. The meeting ended with leadership, asking him to build the presentation for the client pitch. I was furious, but also stuck. If I accused him in front of everyone, it would turn into a he said, she said situation, and I had no proof. So I stayed quiet. Over the next 2 weeks, Dylan worked on the presentation. Everyone kept congratulating him for his idea. Meanwhile, I sat there watching my own concept get polished into a major pitch. The day of the client presentation finally came, and something unexpected happened. The CEO decided to attend. Apparently, this client was important enough that he wanted to see the pitch himself. So the conference room was packed. Senior leadership, executives, the CEO sitting at the head of the table. Dylan started presenting, slide by slide. He walked through the campaign strategy, my strategy, like he had invented it. The room seemed impressed. Then the CEO interrupted him. "Just one question. Interesting concept," he said. "What made you choose that particular audience segmentation?" It was a pretty technical question, the kind that only someone who had actually done the research would know how to answer. Dylan paused. Then he started talking, and it became obvious almost immediately that he didn't actually understand the strategy. He stumbled through a vague explanation. The CEO frowned slightly. Then he asked another question, something even more detailed. Dylan tried again, and completely fell apart. He kept saying things like, "Well, generally speaking," and "we felt it aligned strategically." But he couldn't explain the logic behind it. The room got quiet. Then the CEO looked around the table and said, "Who originally worked on this concept?" Nobody spoke, for about 2 seconds. Then my manager turned toward me, because earlier that week, I had asked him a few specific questions about campaign data, questions that now suddenly made sense. He said, "Actually, I think Alex might have been involved in some of the early thinking." Every head in the room turned toward me. The CEO asked, "Is that true?" I hesitated. Then I said, "Yes. I did the original research and framework." He asked if I could walk them through the reasoning behind the strategy. So I did. Within 5 minutes, the entire room could tell who actually understood the campaign. The CEO nodded a few times. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Next time," he said calmly, "let's make sure the right person is presenting the work." The meeting ended shortly after. Dylan didn't say a single word to me when we left the room. 2 weeks later, he transferred to another department. And somehow, I ended up leading the campaign.
My co-worker kept reporting me to HR, so I started documenting everything. I've worked in my department for about 5 years, and for most of that time, things were pretty smooth. That changed when a new co-worker joined our team last year. Let's call her Karen. From the moment she arrived, she seemed to treat the office like a competition. Everything was about visibility, who spoke the most in meetings, who got credit for projects, who looked busiest. At first, I didn't think much of it, but about 3 months in, my manager pulled me aside and said HR had received a complaint about me. Apparently, someone had reported that I was being dismissive and uncooperative during team meetings. I was confused. I'm pretty quiet at work, if anything. My manager didn't seem too concerned and said it was probably just a misunderstanding. A few weeks later, it happened again. Another HR complaint. This time, the accusation was that I had been withholding information that other team members needed. Again, I had no idea what they were talking about, but HR still had to document it. That's when I started noticing a pattern. Every time something minor happened in the office, a missed email, a scheduling confusion, a project delay, Karen somehow turned it into a concern. And those concerns kept getting reported, not directly to me, to HR. The third complaint was the one that really annoyed me. She claimed I had ignored one of her messages about a client update, which caused delays. The problem? She had never sent me the message. At that point, I realized what was happening. She was building a paper trail. If enough complaints piled up, it would start to look like I was the problem. So I started documenting everything. Every email, every message, every meeting note. If I sent something, I saved it. If someone asked for information, I responded in writing. I even started summarizing conversations afterward with emails like, just confirming what we discussed earlier. It felt a little ridiculous, but I figured it couldn't hurt. A couple months later, it paid off. Karen reported another incident. She told HR that I had refused to share updated client numbers with her before an important meeting. Except this time I had receipts. Not just receipts. Screenshots, timestamps, an entire email chain where I had sent her the numbers 2 days earlier, along with a follow-up message asking if she needed clarification. When HR called me in, I calmly forwarded everything. 10 minutes later, they asked me to stay while they called her in too. I don't know exactly what happened in that room, but I could hear raised voices through the door. Apparently this wasn't the first time someone had raised concerns about her reporting habits. When she came out, she looked furious. She avoided eye contact with me for the rest of the day. After that, the complaint stopped completely. A few months later, she transferred to another team. Before she left, one of my co-workers told me something interesting. Apparently, Karen had been telling people she expected to become the next team lead, and she thought removing a few uncooperative co-workers would make that easier. The irony, when our manager eventually stepped down, they promoted me instead.
My coworker kept scheduling urgent meetings. At my company, meetings are basically a daily fact of life. Some are useful. Most could have been emails. But one coworker, let's call him Brian, took meetings to a completely different level. Brian had joined our team about 6 months earlier. From the beginning, he was the kind of person who always looked busy. He walked around the office quickly, carried a laptop everywhere, and constantly talked about how packed his schedule was. And a lot of that schedule involved meetings. Specifically, meetings with us. At first, it didn't seem strange. Every couple days, we'd get a calendar invite from Brian with titles like Quick Alignment Discussion, Project Sync, Urgent Strategy Check-in. Most of them were scheduled for 30 minutes. But almost every time, the meeting would end after 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes Brian would just ask a single question that could have easily been sent in Slack. Other times he'd say something like, just wanted to make sure we are all on the same page, and then end the call. After a while it started getting annoying, because Brian wasn't just scheduling meetings occasionally. He was scheduling a lot of them, sometimes 3 or 4 a day, and they were always marked as high priority. People started joking about it quietly. Someone on my team said, if Brian schedules one more urgent meeting about nothing, I'm going to start charging consulting fees. But then our manager mentioned something interesting during a team update. He said leadership had noticed how proactive Brian was about communication and collaboration. Apparently, Brian had been praised for keeping everyone aligned. That's when things started making sense. Brian wasn't scheduling meetings because they were necessary. He was scheduling them because they looked good on his calendar. To leadership, It probably seemed like he was constantly coordinating work across the team. Meanwhile, the rest of us were just getting dragged into unnecessary calls. One day, I decided to look closer. I opened our shared calendar and checked Brian's schedule for the week. It was ridiculous. Almost every hour had a meeting block. But when I compared that with what actually happened in those meetings, most of them lasted less than 10 minutes. Some ended after 3. A few didn't even start. Brian would cancel them at the last minute but still leave the time blocked. It was basically a system. Fill the calendar. Appear busy. Get credit for collaboration. The thing that finally exposed it happened during a department-wide review meeting. With our director, Brian started talking about how much time he spent coordinating between teams. He mentioned how his schedule was back-to-back meetings most days. The director seemed impressed. Then one of my coworkers, who clearly had enough, said something that completely changed the conversation. He pulled up the meeting analytics from our calendar system. Turns out it tracks actual meeting durations, not just schedule time. He said, very calmly, "Brian, according to this, most of your meetings average about 6 minutes." The room went silent. Someone else asked, "Wait, really?" My coworker turned the laptop toward the director so he could see the numbers. Dozens of meetings. Average length, 6 to 7 minutes. Some as short as 2 minutes. The director looked confused. Then he asked Brian a simple question. If the meetings only last a few minutes, why are they scheduled for 30? Brian didn't really have an answer. He tried to explain that he was leaving room for discussion. But it wasn't convincing, because everyone in that room had attended those meetings, and everyone knew they were pointless. A week later, management announced a new policy. Any meeting longer than 15 minutes now required a clear agenda and outcome. They also started tracking meeting efficiency across teams. Brian's calendar suddenly became very empty. But the real consequence came during the next performance review cycle. Apparently, leadership had taken a closer look at his contributions. Without the illusion of constant meetings, there wasn't much there. He didn't get the promotion he had been expecting. And a couple months later, he was quietly moved into a lower visibility support role in another department. These days, when someone schedules a pointless meeting, someone inevitably says the same joke. Careful, don't pull a Brian.